Hello, Jake Light here, gaming lawyer at your service. I know, it has been a while since I last made a video about Elden Ring. Without getting into specifics, it's because I also stream way too much on Twitch, so that has kept me from giving myself time to write up a script and get things started. But thanks to COVID forcing me to rest for 2024, and with the support of everyone watching and liking my previous videos, I can finally complete my analysis on the Golden Order's governmental system. As always, please be warned that there will be major spoilers for the game's various characters, factions, and stories, as I'll casually drop important story points here and there. So in our previous couple of videos on the Golden Order, we covered what few laws we know that the citizens had to follow and what the society within was like. But how did the Order function as a government? We know that Marika proclaimed herself as the Queen of the Lands Between since her successful campaign in conquering all over the continent with the help of Erdtree and Radagon. But at the end, she establishes a new divine order, one where she declares herself a goddess, destined to rule over other mortals. In the real world, no such being exists, so we don't really have an official definition as to what type of government the Golden Order is, the closest being that it can be considered as both a monarchy and a theocracy. So before we start going through the different organizations found in the Order, the first important question to ask ourselves is, what exactly does Queen Marika contribute in the Golden Order? There's no official confirmation as to how long Marika has ruled the Lands Between. Based on the one thing that she has been able to provide to the citizens of the Golden Order, it could be hundreds or even thousands of years without any serious rebellion against her dictatorial rule. And that would be the power to make anyone live forever. Sort of. It's most notably known as the Grace, a blessing capable of resurrecting people from the dead. Prime example is the protagonist of the game being able to revive after dying countless times. However, not everyone gets this level of instantaneous rebirth. Most citizens of the Order go through a process called the Erdtree burial, whereby their corpses are brought to specific catacombs to be assimilated into the roots of the Erdtree found in them, as if to be consumed by it. Eventually, the Erdtree will then bear fruit to people from its branches. This end process is not witnessed anywhere during the events of the game, and we only find depictions of it on door carvings in various catacombs and hanging banners in Lindale. And Marika, being intricately connected to the Erdtree, is the one who decides who gets the blessing. Most people would be loyal to her either out of her divine powers or the practical benefits of being able to live for a very long time. Of course, reincarnation is going to be fun if you live a life of poverty and suffering. It could be because years of war have ravaged the Lands Between after the shattering. Most of the continent is uninhabitable and dangerous, but we do not see any cultivated lands that could have been used to produce food that can sustain a growing population of a large country. There is a particular windmill village near the royal capital of the Golden Order called Dominula, which we could infer that's where food was produced for the Order, but we know that's not true since the villagers are secretly cannibals, capturing and eating passing travelers, and also the area lacks any wheat or cornfields nearby that would suggest they gather grains to make flour, in case they haven't always been cannibals in the past. So what is Queen Marika's solution to the Order's agricultural production problem? What else? The Erdtree is the answer again. Other than the power of rebirth, the Erdtree is capable of producing some kind of sap referred to as sacred tears, which were distributed through the churches in the Lands Between. Marika herself used to even personally bestow them to people, and based on the effects of casting Erdtree incantations, we can make an educated guess that drinking directly from the saps would provide abundant of health benefits to people compared to just borrowing the Erdtree's power momentarily. So the Queen could have provided the people of the Lands Between a healthy life, albeit lacking choice of food. But what about the possibility of her rule being usurped locally or being invaded from the outside? Marika is very fearful of someone or something taking away her control and authority, especially outside forces that she can't deal with alone. In other words, Her Highness needed military strength, and she made plenty through the power of family. since Erdtree was casted out as a tarnished for reasons, and Radagon is just Marika herself. She needed people to help her manage the different parts of the continent, so she started making her own lords and generals, literally. The Queen's new military factions were all under control of Marika's most powerful immortal demigod offsprings. The locations of where this organization seems to be quite strategically placed as well, as they protect the lands between's borders from all possible invasions. First, Godwyn, her favorite son, used to defend the Golden Order's royal capital, Leyndell, where the all-important Erdtree is also located. We have previously mentioned his feats during the time he fought against the ancient dragons, and those beings might have made their assault from Varam Azula. After his death in the Night of the Black Knives, Morgoth, also Marika's son, but less favored, may have unofficially replaced him as the commander and guardian of the center of the continent, until the latest events that happened in the game. Second, Rykard, the family guy, has his manor located in Mount Gelmir, which is located next to Liurnia, so perhaps together with his Glintstone mother, Queen Renala, and the Academy of Raya Lucaria, they once defended the western region until the shattering occurred. Third, Radahn, the mightiest demigod amongst Marika's children, is stationed in Caelid, where he guarded the southeastern region of the continent. That is, if we are basing our findings only during the time the protagonist finds themselves in. Radahn perhaps have also governed over the entire southern region, simply because Godric was never the original lord of the Stormveil castle in Limgrave until the shattering occurred. According to the Mimic's Veil, he was just a simple nobleman that lived in Leyndell at the time before being chased away. The only clue that supports this theory is a character named Commander O'Neill, which is a boss you fight in Caelid. Throughout the battle, he periodically summons spirits that are literally the same soldiers you fight in Stormveil Castle. Why he might be related to Radahn instead is because of his weapon's description, as it says, a beaten red battle standard is furled around this time-worn halberd. Even after his lord was fled, Commander O'Neill continued to brandish this flag in the devastation of the rot-eaten field of battle, the sole veteran who remembers this battle with pride. Aside from the red flag on a weapon which resembles the colors worn by the Radahn's soldiers, it's also mentioned that the commander's lord was fled. Lord referring to Radahn, and fled meaning being carried to safety from the rot-eaten field of battle. Is most likely when Melania released her Scarlet Rot powers on Radahn. What I'm suggesting here is that Commander O'Neill had served Radahn and helped defend the areas in Limgrave and Weeping Peninsula, but sometime during Radahn's war against Miquella, O'Neill went to aid him in Caelid, opening an opportunity for Godric to take over the southern region. Thus, it would make sense to say that Miquella, brother of Melania and her lord, were originally tasked by Queen Marika to protect the northern region of the lands between. There is no solid proof of this other than in Castle Sol, which is in the mountaintops of the Giants. The fortified building houses Commander Niall and his spirit soldiers, which they may have served under Miquella, as he protects the secret medallion that unlocks the path to his Erdtree. The forces which Miquella had commanded might have been smaller due to the fact that in that region, the only threat that may come about would be the remnants of the Giants that still wandered in that valley. But he is also assisted by other factions such as the Zamor warriors, fire monks, and thorn sorcerers. Then again, Melania and her Clean Rod Knights were able to be a match against Radahn and his Redmane soldiers. And for the cherry on top, Marika's prosperous country cannot be perfect without its religious institutions. Theocratical governments often use religion as the basis to form laws and systems to have citizens live in line with what is correct and right based on their beliefs. The purpose is to make sure order is maintained and chaos and destruction is reduced or prevented by putting the fear of divine punishment in them. I already talked about why certain things are legal to do, while some are not in my other videos, and they are heavily tied to the religious institutions found in the Order, but they do serve some other functions as well. You'd think since we have so much information about the Golden Order, surely we know what they actually do in the churches littered around the lands between, right? Aside from what has been mentioned earlier in regards to Marika's role, we don't have explicit confirmation on the purposes of the churches, other than a place to store the Erdtree's sacred tears, and maybe they provide some funeral services, as some of them are built with graveyards. We don't know for certain who attends and maintains the church grounds. Maybe there were plenty of clergymen like Brother Corin and Goldmask who might be responsible in performing ceremonies, teaching and guiding people in the ways of the Golden Order. But we'll never know for sure, since after shattering, all the churches are in ruins and disarray. We've mentioned about Two Fingers as having their own organization in the past. Although being part and parcel of the Golden Order, they do have other things to do for the country as well. Aside from conveying the words of the Greater Wheel, they are also tasked with selecting demigods to become Empyreans, essentially replacements for Marika, in the event she can no longer rule and be the bearer of the Elden Ring. What the criteria is to be chosen is unknown. The only commonality between the candidates, Rani, Melania, Mikola, and the Glowmite Queen, is that they are related to Marika in some way. The Two Fingers seem to be also responsible in spreading the teachings of the Golden Order outside the lands between via sending confessors, both as representatives of the Order but also as spies against its enemies. The Fire Monks played a very minor role in the Order ever since the war against the Giants ended, as afterwards they were only tasked to keep guard at the mountaintops to make sure no remaining giants would come for the Order, whilst keeping people away from learning the Fire Giants' incantations. Like the Two Fingers, the Fire Monks are merely another religious branch of the Order. They were trained by the Order to resist the temptations of fire and specialized themselves to fight against giants. They also seem to utilize exiled criminals called Thorn Sorcerers in their forces, perhaps suggesting that they serve as some kind of wardens as well. But alas, with time passing, most fire monks eventually succumb to the allure of the fell god's flame and use fire incantations themselves. Can't really blame them since it's a bit chilly up there. For completion's sake, we'll be also wrapping this up by touching on some remaining administrations, but since there's not much information or evidence to glean through, this will be very brief. We know there are laws in the Golden Order and the punishments for breaking them, but who are the ones responsible in enforcing them? As talked about in my previous video, there were inquisitors in the Order that acted as a police force that catches and interrogates the wanted. We are also aware that Praetor Rykard, basing on his title and being referred by Gideon Ofnir as a ruthless justiciar, might indicate there was some sort of court system where there were magistrates or judges deciding on criminal cases as well. And finally, with carrying out the actual sentences, the House of Murray was said to be responsible in executing criminals, according to Murray Mass and Murray's executioner's sword. Though we have the blessings of the Erdtree to make sure citizens stay alive, the Order also employed perfumers as apothecaries to care for the sick and needy. Before they started spraying face-melting powders at their enemies, perfumers used their skills to produce medicine for treating people of sickness and injuries. And according to at least one perfumer, Tricia, we know that some of them actually took care of those that were considered impure by the Order, such as the omens and misbegottens that we have talked about. Of course, the Lands Between is a huge world. All the tasks or jobs can't be done by just the above mentioned, so here comes the nobles, which we might have mostly ignored due to how weak and insignificant they are in the game. Like Malay Murray, Kennethite, or Godric, there could be many lords and nobles that make up the bulk of governing smaller parts of the continent, which the demigods would not be able to micromanage. Perhaps they were also responsible in doing business, collecting taxes, resolving local disputes, or slave trades. Definitely the slave trades. Well, that's it for the Golden Order. This has been a very insightful journey looking into what FromSoft could do in terms of visually showing us a functional country and society, and finding what little we can get as evidence of it. Queen Marika strived to make a perfect world for herself and her children, but a heavy reliance on the powers of the Elden Ring to rule a country for eternity eventually caused her downfall. That said, is there a country or faction in this world where a mere mortal would have a better life? For now, I'd like to know what you think. Did you find any of the things we mentioned to be inaccurate or disagreeable? Do you think you could do better than Marika if you had her powers? Let me know down in the comments. And again, if you enjoyed this video and like to see more of what I make, please consider liking and subscribing to my channel. Until next time, stay hopeful, but be critical.